All right, welcome back. Another Spinato spin. Hope you all surviving the winter. It's almost over. Only got a few more days left, 9, maybe 10 days left at the most, and we'll be into the March. St. Patty's Day right around the corner, coming up here on Saturday. Always good to look forward to the spring, right? There's the seasons of life. We could talk about that for a second. Seasons of life. The spring always follows. Right after the winter, and don't we need the spring, right? We need the spring after a tough winter. We always need the summer to make sure we're helping our plants, our lives, all the things we're working on, helping them to grow. And then all of a sudden, the fall, you got your harvest. You got a lot of things going on in the fall. You got to hope that you plant well in the spring. Otherwise, your fall could be a disaster, right? And then sometimes in life, even though we do all those things, it hails on our crops, and the next thing you know, we have nothing. And then we're into the winter, believe it or not. And if we didn't store our goods and didn't store our grains or whatever, we're in trouble, aren't we? Well, that's what life's all about. Life comes down to that. Life comes down to a lot of one, two, three punches. You ever notice that? You get your ready, set, go. That's pretty much how ready, aim, fire, all that stuff, right? One, two, three, one, two, three, one after another. And here's another one, two, three for you. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. There's another one, two, three after this one, but let's focus on this one for a second. How about this? Study, practice, teach. Study, practice, teach. What does that really mean? That means that whatever you want to understand fully, you've got to know it so well and be so well versed at it that you could teach it. But before you could teach it, you got to practice, don't you? I mean, you can't teach your little child or somebody's little child how to ride a bike if you don't know how to ride one yourself, can you? Well, it's a lot. Life is a lot like that. There's certain simple things that we have to do, but if when we do them over and over again, we'll know them so well we can actually teach somebody. What do we want to teach? Well, how about a good attitude? How about a positive attitude? How about an attitude where, don't worry about the setback. We're going to come back and do it better next time. All that stuff is what makes a person develop, makes a person grow, makes a person encourage one another and be a vital part of what we're looking for to do. That expression makes a lot of sense, Kennedy said, which he took from Cicero, by the way, great orator. He said, ask not. He said, ask not what your country could do for you, but ask what you could do for your country. Well, that's what we're all about. We're all about what can we put into the well, not what we can take out of the well. What can we do to make everything better? And one of the best things you could do is start right there. Study, practice, teach. I did a survey once a long time ago. They said to a bunch of students, they brought them in a room and they went over some very difficult material. And they said to them, here, we're gonna test you in another half hour on this material. So you better make sure you do really well. Then they took a group of students, another group of students, and they said, look we're going to give you this material. It's going to be kind of tough to comprehend, kind of tough to understand. But after you take in this material, we want you to teach it to somebody else. Now, which group you think got into it more? Which group you think really tried a little harder, gave a little more effort to understand what it was that they had to learn? Well, if you said the ones that had to teach it afterwards, you were right. Why is that? Because there's something to it. There's something that can pass on to somebody else. There's a benefit of it. There's a reason why they really wanted to absorb the material. They wanted to be helpful. They wanted to reach out to somebody else. They said, hey, if I got to learn it and then I got to teach it, boy, I better make sure I learn it. I better make sure I pay attention because I'm going to just be perpetuating and passing on to somebody else and they're going to mess it all up. I better make sure I understand what I'm talking about before I start talking. There's a lot of things out there that really kind of doesn't sit right with me. Maybe it sit right with you. Well, you hear a rumor, right? Or you hear something out there and somebody said something. and you're not really sure, but have you ever asked this question to the person that gave you the information? Why don't you say something like this? Well, where'd you hear it from? Where'd you hear that information from? And they say, well, I heard it from so and so. Really? Well, you know what the next question is? Where did they hear it from? And if that person says, I don't know, you know what the next question is to that person? Don't you think you ought to find out? Before you start spreading rumors, don't you think you ought to find out where the source of it really is? Isn't that important? See, that's all part of teaching. That's all part of getting the word out. That's all part of improving people. That's all part of allowing people not just to settle for untruths and things that are out there that aren't really going to help one another. You got to always want to help one another. Always got to have a good focus on that kind of information. And here's another thing to keep in mind, too. When you start studying something, you got to practice. You got to practice. Remember high school French, high school Spanish? They asked you to practice it. You got to say it over and over. You don't just look at it in a book and walk away. You got to practice it. And then you got to incorporate it into your being. You got to let it take over you. You got to be all part of it. I'll wrap it up with this. Imagine this. Now, most of you out there, I don't want to disparage on anyone that's from another country, or I guarantee there's a lot of us that are watching this, or people that are watching this, don't know how to speak Russian. Don't know anything about Russia, really, not that much, right? Well, let me ask you this question. You know nothing about Russia, right? Well, how about if we put you in Russia right now, and we put you with a group of Russians, and they started talking to you in Russian, and all of a sudden you started watching Russian movies, and you start getting Russian newspapers, and all kinds of information like that, all in Russian. Now, you started off without knowing anything about Russia, right? Well, how much better on a scale of 1 to 10 would you be in your understanding of Russian words, speaking Russian, and understand a little more about the Russian culture? If you were there for a month, say 2 months, 3 months, right there in Russia, you think you'd be pretty good at it? Of course. That's what it takes. That's what they mean by study, practice, teach. You got to get it involved in yourself. You got to let it all absorb yourself and have it ooze out of you. And that's just a dose of what we're going to do with positive attitude and moving forward. Get around positive people and have them help you get to the next step, and you help them get to the next step. We'll catch you next time on the Spinato Spin. Thanks for listening in. Have a good one, everybody.